For today's session, we are very, very honored and grateful to have Dr. Julia Lee from UNIMAS to talk to us and to introduce to us some practical strategies that we could use for children who experience or who are experiencing reading difficulties. So without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Dr. Julia.
Thank you very much, Laitin, and welcome to all teachers, parents from all over Malaysia. Thank you for joining us on this topic on reading strategies. I am very honored to be invited by the National Early Childhood Intervention Council, of which I'm also a member. And I'm also very thankful to all the UNIMAS team who helped to organize this with Laitin. Thank you very much, Laitin. So let me share my screen. I think I have been disabled from sharing my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry, Dr. Julia.
No problem. Can I try it now? I think I'll try it now again. Can you see it? Are you able to see it, Lighting? Okay, great. All right, so this is the new normal. We'll check on the other side whether they can see it, whether they can hear it. So this is what I've been doing the whole semester with my students. So again, a very good morning to all parents and teachers. The topic is practical strategies for children with reading difficulties. We are actually moving away from the labels like dyslexia and reading disabilities. But in a few minutes, I'll be talking about the definition of reading disability and dyslexia, because in order for us to help the children, we need to know what it looks like. We need to know what are the symptoms and the manifestations. Yes, before I continue, we are located in Sarawak, in Kota Semarahan, and I'm from the Faculty of Cognitive Sciences and Human Development. So I'd like to share a little bit about my education and experience. Interestingly, I did not start out in the education profession. I was in the computer industry for a while. And then when I joined the university, they asked me to further my studies. And I chose to pursue my master's in educational psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then several years later, I went for my PhD in special education. I was particularly interested in children who could not read because of one particular experience that I had when we went to about 10 schools in Sarawak in 2007. And I realized that some children at the age of 10 to 12 could not read. I felt so heartbroken because I could imagine what kind of future they were going to have. So I was very persistent in pursuing a degree in reading, but I'm sure some of you may be very familiar that in the US, some of the degrees may be called PhD in education or special education, but I decided to choose where the professor was located. So I went to Florida State University, and they have an entire research center, which is called Florida Center for Reading Research. So over there, if you look at the pictures here, so I've been trained to work with children individually, and also later on when I came back here to Malaysia, I had the opportunity to conduct literacy camps with children. I'll talk a little bit more about what I'm seeing in Malaysia. And also some of the other certificates. As you may be aware, none of the children seem to be the same. If, for example, if I work with a child with autism and he's trying to learn how to read, and a child with a reading problem but also has ADHD issues, so then the person working with the children will have to be continually equipped, and we actually have to go for further training and all that. That's why you see all these certificates here. Sometimes I feel like what I know is not enough, so I have to attend various sessions, for example, cognitive behavior therapy, Orton Gillingham training, EQ, emotional intelligence, how to help the children to develop their self-esteem, because along the way, I think children who are a bit older tend to lose their motivation and their passion for learning. They may hate going to school, right? So there's a need to be equipped for those of you who are, I would say, in the profession. I would say continuous professional development is the key for all of us to help the children. I hope I'm loud and clear. My volume is at 100 now, 100%. So here in Sarawak, I've done some literacy camps and we went to the rural schools. When I went to the rural area, like Sri Aman and Dalat, rural, sub-rural, I found that the children didn't really have a reading disability that I had learned in the developed country. Most of the children, sometimes they could not read because they came from poor families. There were no books in the home. And some of them were so poor they had nothing to eat. So this is the problem that I've seen in our rural areas in Sarawak, and it could happen also in West Malaysia. I know I'm talking to a larger audience here, so I welcome all of you later on if you want to share your feedback or your questions in the chat screen. And you may stop me anytime. So what is reading? What is a reading difficulty? Well, it is manifested as a problem not knowing how to read, not knowing how to recognize the connections between letters and sounds. For example, the word here is house, but the child may actually bark at the word and say horse. And if you want to do a test, you could literally put a picture of a horse there and ask the child to read, is it a horse or a house? You know that they are guessing if they are reading horse. They're looking at the picture and they're reading it. And I've seen this happen where the children who are highly intelligent are able to hide their reading problems, interestingly. So they need help. Many of the children may end up having behavioral issues in the schools, and teachers who are untrained may not know what is that behavioral problem. So there's a need to actually ask a question, what is the root cause of the problem? Why is this child acting up? Why is he teasing his friends during class time? So we really need to understand the root of the problem. Because if we don't, then we will miss that and the child will just fall between the cracks in the education system. And then he or she will proceed from the early primary setting to the upper primary school setting and then secondary school. So there's going to be a problem. So we all know that school success is very important. School success, knowing how to read is so basic. If a child wants to specialize in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, now we have the STEM and STEAM acronyms. Let's say they want to pursue it. They have big dreams, but they don't know how to read. That particular basic knowledge of literacy is going to be a barrier in terms of how parents and teachers can help them achieve that potential. So reading is actually the first line of defense. It's the ticket to success in life. There are 3 common patterns of poor reading. I won't go into the theory, but I'm just giving a little bit of theory so that I don't bore people. But like I was sharing with Laitin, just like a doctor, if we go and see a doctor, in order for the doctor to give us the right medicine, the right medication, he needs to know what's the problem. So in the same way, for today, this 1 hour session, I'll just share very simply poor reading can be in the form of word reading level difficulties. It could be a reading comprehension difficulty, or it could be a mixed bag of word reading problems and reading comprehension. When we help the children, we have to help them at the first level. We have to help them make connections between the letters and the sounds and help them learn how to read. I'll be talking about the strategies in a while. So what I'm trying to say here for this particular slide is that we need to know what's the problem. If we don't know what's the problem, we may give them the wrong solution. Most people know more about the word dyslexia, the terminology dyslexia. It has been portrayed in movies, and there are dyslexia associations in Selangor, in Sarawak, in Singapore, Dyslexia Association of Singapore, which I've also visited in the past. So dyslexia is known as a specific reading disability which affects poor reading. It is about reading and spelling. So these are like two sides of the coin. You may see atrocious spelling ability of the children, and this may signify, may not, may signify inability to read as well. So these are like cousins, they're interrelated, poor reading and poor spelling. And this problem, the core problem with regards to dyslexia is the difficulty in phonological processing. Phonology, phone is sound, telephone, phone. So phonological processing means the processing of sounds. What are the common signs? For teachers, I think is very important. And parents are the first teachers. So usually parents, if they are very observant, they may realize something is not quite right. So the common signs are difficulties in learning to speak. Maybe there's a delay even in speech. Problems organizing written and spoken language. That means they have lots of ideas, they can talk really well. But when it comes to organizing written word, written text, there's going to be a problem because some other problems are also happening. Maybe it could be working memory problem where they're not able to string the words together. At the earlier level, they could also have difficulty in learning the letter names. They may be the last in the class to learn the letter names and the letter sounds. And inaccurate decoding, like reading house as horse or something else. It's just guessing, barking at the words. And huge problems in spelling. And I also often see problems in handwriting. All the letters are all glued up as if there's not enough paper to write. So there's comorbidity issues involved and hard time remembering facts. So I put here in red is in small letters, but what I'm trying to say is that none of the children seem to be the same. They have slightly different problems and it varies in severity. And the children I've seen in the rural areas here in Sarawak, they don't have actually the biological problem. It is more of an experiential, environmental problem that they are facing. Poverty affects their reading ability. I do apologize for sharing a journal paper, but I'm highlighting here, after 40 years of research, in 2004, there was a very important publication that was made by a group of psychologists and researchers in education who found that collectively from 40 years of research that dyslexia is inadequate word identification. Children cannot identify the words, they cannot decode it, they're not able to read it. But as I said, it varies in severity. And also, they have, I put here in a red box, phonological skill deficiency. They cannot make connections between the letters and the sounds. And sometimes I find that they're confused between the sounds as well. So there's a need to make sure that we give them the right amount of dosage of remediation and intervention so that they don't lose their motivation. When they reach teenage years, other kinds of problems will crop up. Okay, and the last box here, I think is important for teachers to understand, especially if you teach in a public school, which is a bit far from the urban area. You may see that the poor readers are impaired because they have inadequate instruction, or sometimes the teachers may not be teaching it in the right way. I think it's painful for teachers to hear that a reading problem may arise because of inadequate instruction. But the research here from 40 years of research has shown that the way we teach the children how to read will affect, it's like what you put in will be what you get. Okay, and also the experiential factors, as I've mentioned, I've seen children in the rural area, they have nothing to eat, many siblings in the family, even malnutrition during the mother's pregnancy that has caused the child to have low IQ. So they're not able to absorb what they're learning. So they have got very weak working memory and long-term memory. Please stop me and do ask me questions in the chat screen as I go along, because I cannot see anybody as I'm talking now. For some reason, I don't know what happened to my screen. So I'm just feeling that I'm talking alone here as I tell my university students. What are the strategies? I think one of the successful strategies would be to ensure that we teach it according to the multiple senses that children have. Use visual strategies, auditory strategies, movement, tactile, being able to touch, use sand to write in the sky, plasticine. You can make your own plasticine from flour and water and oil. Visually, they have to see it, they have to hear it, and movement and tactile, being able to touch it. I find that sometimes some children cannot focus, so we need to use some other strategy. So we have to be very flexible. If we are teachers or if we are interventionists or even parents, you have to figure out how does your child learn? How does he process? How does he or she process information? So the better you understand the child, the better your strategy is customized according to his or her needs. So I'm borrowing from NECIC.com here. We need to help the children to see it, is one of our senses. Visuals, say it, auditory, speech, hear it, auditory, and write it. So when they write, there is tactile and also kinesthetic. They actually move their hands and they actually get to see the word being written. And I would say that from my experience, not all the children like to write. Some of them, they hate writing. So we need to help them develop the passion to write. So as I mentioned, when we provide the strategies, we need to make sure that they are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, make sure that it's systematic, cumulative. So we don't teach them how to read a long text before we teach them how to decode, for example, a word. Or if they don't know the letter sounds, we need to make sure that the letter sounds are taken care of first. And direct instruction, tell them. Because some of the children, they are not metacognitive, they're not able to reflect up here that, hey, you know what? When I read, the letters and the sounds match. So we need to tell them directly. For teachers, I would suggest that we need to apply diagnostic teaching. That means we need to know the problem so we can teach to the problem. It's just like doctors giving us the right medication, doctors giving us the right diagnosis for an ailment or an illness. So diagnostic teaching is needed so that we can help the children achieve automaticity, to read with accuracy, to read with speed and comfort, instead of barking at the word, not being sure, losing self-esteem, losing their motivation. So it's important. And also a combination of synthetic and analytic phonics. Analytic means we help them to read the different sounds and then combine them together, blend them. Analytic is looking at a big word and figuring what are the sounds inside. I would say we can mix and match both methods. And balance, make sure that we also help them to love reading. So we introduce different books to them. I don't know about your state. Sometimes over here in Sarawak, in Kuching itself, we have book fairs and all that. It's important to actually invest in books. I know teachers use a lot of their own money to purchase books. And I think it's a good investment so that we can focus on meaning focus. So code focus means to focus on the phonics or the letter sounds combinations and decoding. Meaning focus, buy books that the children like. Or There's no need to buy books. If you are a member of a library, you can bring them to the library. But of course, now with the COVID-19 pandemic, perhaps it'd be good to, order some books or purchase some online books. I'm going to move on now to the strategies itself. The first level of the strategy, the most basic, is to help the children gain phonemic awareness. Phonemes are the smallest sounds in words. And in alphabetic languages, like Malay language and English language, or Spanish language or Finnish language, all of us, we talk about the common sounds. For example, this picture that you see here, we can ask the child, what is the first sound in, ask them what this picture is about, sun. What's the first sound in sun? Do you hear? So we introduce to them the connection between the letters and the sounds. And by the way, all these are evidence-based. I actually spent 4 years just learning about all of this and other things, right, for my PhD. So the boxes here are what we call acronym boxes. They help the children visualize, so they get to see it as well. They got to hear it earlier, they got to see the vocabulary word and see the picture itself. And then over here, you have the letters in the boxes, in the individual boxes, because some children actually don't know that every letter has its sound. Some children, they don't know, especially children with very severe dyslexia. They may not know that every word has a sound, but they may be very good at expressive skills. They may be very good at talking and all that. So sometimes parents say, how could it be that the child is not doing well in school when he can narrate to us the entire movie about something that happened? So it can be confusing to parents that why is a child without any language problems having literacy? Literacy means knowing how to read. The alphabetic code refers to the connection between letters and sounds. So phoneme is more about the sounds itself. The alphabetic code is to teach them phonics, the connection between the letters and the sounds. So what is phonics? As I mentioned, connection between letters and sounds. It should be introduced early. In the UK, there is actually a special, I would say a white paper that was written by they call it the Rose Commission. The commissioner actually wrote a huge and thick documentation that phonics should be taught as early as possible. And in the US, since year 2020, the National Reading Panel and subsequently National Early Literacy Panel have mentioned that phonics is so important. So it works best with all beginning readers, children who are at risk. For example, the children that I talked about earlier in the rural areas, they don't have dyslexia, they don't have a biological problem with reading, but they are certainly at risk. And in the long term, they may drop out of school early. So children who are at risk and children diagnosed with reading disabilities. The diagnosis usually happens I would say in Malaysia, in the urban areas, like the cities. The parents who are more aware may send their children for diagnosis. So, but many children here in Malaysia are not diagnosed. They're undiagnosed. If teachers are not trained, they don't know what's the problem with the children. So phonics should be explicit, that means direct, tell them directly what are the sounds. It should be systematic from easy to more challenging, and it is sequential, step by step, tell them what it is. I've seen teachers asking the children to guess the sounds, but it doesn't work with children with reading difficulty, so we have to show them first. And here is another picture from my graduate training at Florida State University. So we helped this one little boy. Everything is anonymous, you can only see his hands. But as part of our doctoral program, we went out to schools. And this is actually under a program called America Reads. So all over the US, they have this program called America Reads, a vision that the entire American nation should read. So I had imagined actually maybe there should be a Malaysia Reads. one day. So here, the child is actually far behind. He was far behind in his class, so we went and conducted intervention. So we served as his educational interventionist, and we taught him how to connect the letter sounds, taught him phonics use, various mechanisms, various strategies. So this one that you can see here is the Elconin box. And after one semester, I was very surprised that he was able to catch up. Now, a child with dyslexia would take a bit longer. A child with a biological problem, neurobiological problem, would take longer. But this child is because of his experiential setting, the environment, no books in the house, parents are divorced, no attention given, no parental engagement, etc. So after one semester, that's about 4 months of one-to-one intervention, twice a week, he improved. So this is the Elconin box that I mentioned. It looks really simple, but I do find it really helpful when we try to teach the children. So for example, spell the word big. The big dog barked at the squirrel. So get them to write in the boxes. So then they can make sense. They hear the sound, they write it. So there's a lot of interconnection between language that they hear and language that they write. All this is very theoretical. Researchers have found that it's important to connect the ear to the hand, language by hand. And here is another strategy. I have used it once in a while, but not all children are very interested in this. This is called finger tapping. Basically, how it works is that if you've got all these the finger, the child can use any hand, which is dominant. So let's say they say D-O-G, I just use a simple word, D-O-G, dog. Then they pound it on the table so they can hear it. So basically it works like this. This is my own hand drawing of my own fingers actually. So C-A-T, they know there are 3 sounds, pound it. So various children need different approaches. It doesn't work for every child. It's not like one size fits all. So we need to figure out what works for a certain child and what they like. And some children, they don't like sand. If you try to get them to write in sand, they feel that it's it doesn't feel good on their skin. Vowel sticks, I've used this before. Basically get them to know the vowels. Vowels is quite difficult to learn for children with reading disability and reading difficulty, and we may use the vowel sound. So I'm sure teachers will end up collecting ice cream sticks, or you can buy this at the bookshop and paint them and then stick the vowels here and then get them to see what's the vowel sound. So introduce the word vowel to them. What's the vowel sound in chord? So then they may take up any of these ice cream sticks. So if you're working with a group of 4, you may, I suppose, prepare several ice cream sticks for them or take turns and all that. So I think this is to emphasize the need to understand vowels. I've actually done a research on this, back to this screen. I've done a research where children will learn the vowel sounds last. They will learn the first sound first, and then the last sound. Say you have a CVC word like this, a consonant, vowel, consonant word. This will be the last one they will be able to capture. So there's a need to train the children on the vowels. And the other one is to get the children to run around, so they will roll this bowling ball. All these are very cheap plastic bowling pins. So a teacher or parent may stick the sight words. Sight words are words that children need to read on the spot. There's no time to decode and say, but no, when they read it in the storybook, they have to be fast. So it's called sight words. By sight, they read by sight. So if they hit any word here, but they have to read it. So they like to collect points. Children love to collect points. So when they collect more points, they maybe you can set up another reward system where they can collect all the points and exchange it for something else. So over here, if they roll the bowling ball and they hit she, for example, if they get it right, they get 1 point. They don't get it right, no points. Handwriting, I find that children with reading problems may also have handwriting problems. It seems to go hand in hand. And Virginia Berninger mentioned that it's language by hand. So one is language by ear, reading is language by ear, and writing is language by hand. So you can see here, this is a tactile mat, so that the child can feel it. When they write it, they can feel it. So some children, they need all these multi-sensory approaches. So if we don't give it to them, they may still have a difficulty. So what we do here is scaffold. Scaffold or help them. The word scaffolding is from construction, right? You have a scaffold up the building. So we scaffold the process of learning so that slowly we can remove this tactile mat at the background, this white color tactile mat here at the background here. I think you can see it from your screen. And slowly they'll be able to write confidently any letter that you narrate or dictate to them.
Julia, before we move on, there's a
Yep.
question
Okay.
about the vowel sticks. Is the vowel
I can't
sticks?
see, hang on, let me switch on my, I find it a bit odd that I'm talking to my own screen. Okay, great. Okay, I can see you now.
Okay. The question is, the vowel sticks is more like matching the same vowels that they see, or is it more auditory?
It can be auditory. I think we have to be very creative. I think it depends on the children. So if we, so in terms of reading, we have got these expressive skills and receptive skills. So we can train them auditorily. They just hear any sound that you tell them and they can put up the vowel sticks, or they can read it and they put it up. So that one is more like practice. So it could be just focusing on their phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness doesn't focus on being able to see it, but research has shown that we do need to combine that with what they see. So I think we can do it in stages. We can do it auditorily first, and then we can show it to them as well. I don't think this is a once-off kind of session. So we can revisit the use of vowel sticks until they get really bored. Some children get really bored with things that you show. So I think teachers need to, as I mentioned yesterday when I was trying out the system with you, teachers may end up collecting magazines, try something new, collecting, I don't know, colored papers, try other things. So if they get bored with the vowel sticks, you can try something else, or any shape that you can find in your house, or you can collect some things. So it need not be vowel sticks as well. I think teaching has to be a creative act of, out of the box thinking. I think teachers should be like those in Finland, higher order thinking skills, and the best will become teachers. The most passionate are teachers, and they'll go all out and make their own things. It did not be a vowel stick, even it could be a post-it note. I have some in my cupboard where you can have little, okay, here I'm at my table here, you can have this, you can fold it up, you can make your own, and also you can get ideas. So the vowel sticks can be auditorily first, auditory discrimination first by just hearing, and they could also see it as well. Any other questions? I didn't check the chat screen.
So far, there's the vowel sticks. And then, okay, there's another question that just came up. Will the student rely on the visual instead of auditory, as the color of the vowel is different with different consonants? And does the person have to make all the vowel sticks in the same color to avoid that?
I think colors should be differentiated. Like the Montessori programs, when you go to Montessori classrooms, you've got all these color pencils that are all the same color. You've got all the pinks and the greens and the reds. What's the purpose? So in Montessori, it's also almost auto-regulation. you know where to take the color that you want. So I think we can choose to designate a certain color for a vowel. So I think even when we teach them using the cards, all the vowels may be colored red or yellow or green. It's up to the teacher. I don't think there's any science behind the choice of color when we teach. But of course, I don't know, personally, I like red. I like red, or it can be the color of the card can be different so that we can help the children pay attention. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to attract the attention of the children. We are trying to give them scaffolds. It's almost like when we first learned how to ride a bicycle, we had the two extra wheels on the side. We will use it until such a time we know how to balance ourselves. And when we remove that, our parents will know when to remove that. Or when we use floats when swimming, up to a certain time when we already learn how to float, we no longer need the floats because we are able to balance, we understand the buoyancy of our own bodies in the water. It's the same thing with the children. When you remove it from one child to another, I think it depends. It's almost like a doctor trying to think of medication for his patients. 100 patients may walk into the clinic and 100 patients may get different types of dosages, right? So I think so diagnostic teaching is very important. It's very important to tailor it for that particular child. Of course, in a classroom, I think maybe the teacher has to sit down and plan what kind of strategies they're going to use for the whole class. And if there is anybody, any outlier who is left behind, maybe some other strategies needs to be used. Can't hear you. Your volume.
Okay, I think there's no more questions at this point.
Okay.
Can go on.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that's the thing about online presentation. I see nobody else but my screen, and then I see you. Okay, fluency. Yes, being fluent is a very important skill because if the child is struggling how to read fluently, that would affect his or her comprehension. That will impose a lot of cognitive load, we call it. Cognitive load means they spend all their thinking time figuring how to sound out the words. Then they don't have enough cognitive space to actually think about what does the whole sentence mean. So fluency can be at the word level and it can be at the connected text level. That means all the words in one passage has to be read fluently. If they don't read fluently, a teacher should be sensitive enough to say that something is not quite right there. So I think reading aloud in the classroom is actually quite useful. Every child reads a line. If there are 20 kids, they would have read 20 lines in the storybook. And so the fluency provides support so that children can read for meaning, to understand what they read. So when we say fluency, we may use rings here. You can buy it very cheaply at the store and then just laminate and then get them to practice by sight, because some words are not easily decoded. For example, yard. How do you decode yard? How do you about is a schwa. So some words like the, how do you decode the? So some words have to be sort of memorized, so it's read by sight. And here is another picture of that same boy that we used to do intervention on. So we had a team, like there were two of us, doctoral students. We went and we conducted intervention for this little boy. And this is a decodable book. And you notice that the book has got easy words in it. Sid has a tin pan, Sid has a tin can, Sid has a tin rim, and something else over there, I cannot see it. But so what the idea of the decodable book is for a child to gain confidence in decoding, to pick up fluency, and then we can also then introduce later on other books that are not so decodable. something more interesting. So decodable books are really usually more repetitive, but it's quite important for the young children and children at risk and children with reading disabilities or reading difficulties. Here is a game that I've created. So sometimes I just think of games that I can create. So you can buy very cheaply the dice and get them to roll the dice. And then whatever number the dice lands on with the face up, let's say they have a 6 on the dice, they have to read half. And so they collect points. So the points can be exchanged with something else. So I think there's a lot of behavioral management issues as well when we work with children. We cannot be very boring folks. They won't like us if we are very boring. Here, vocabulary, for example, some children, they may not know what a vat is or a hand. So we can cut out pictures. As I mentioned, I've collected magazines from Malaysia Airlines, Asia. I've collected magazines from here and there. Sometimes I would collect. And you do need it when you are working with the children, right? So vocabulary is important. So during my doctoral studies, I remember we were also busy even looking for different diagrams on the internet that we could print freely and then let the child we were trying to do intervention on color it, coloring, draw dots around it, for example, or draw bubble and make it into a dialogue. So we had to be very creative. And here is that same little boy in Florida. So we actually, this is actually my partner's idea to cut out comics, different hats. So these comics are all wearing different hats. And the vocabulary of the day is hat. And hat, then you can convert that into a phonics session. Hat starts with and then at, hat. And then so different hats and then get him to color and paste it and let him do it by himself. Let the child do it by themselves and then himself, and then they will really enjoy that arts and craft moment because we give them opportunities to enjoy doing that art piece, and then they can take it home and show it to their family. Comprehension. So as we are progressing from the most fundamental until comprehension. So in comprehension, when we read a book, let's say Super Dog, The Heart of a Hero, so we can engage the child to complete the sentence. A little short, but not too tall, for example. And then recall. Can you tell me what happened to the little red engine in the story? Get them to recall. Open-ended, tell me what's happening in this picture. We can use our WH questions: where, which, when, what, and how. What is the name of this dog? And then distancing is a method where we get them to think about their own household or their own environment. What do you think? Do you also have a dog like this at home? Then they can relate to the story. So getting the children engaged in reading, I think, is very important so that they build a love for reading. If they love reading, we don't have to force them to read. So books, maybe some children are interested in science, so make sure we get these books ready for them. Many children love dinosaurs. Make sure we have this ready as well for them to choose. Give them choice. Give them choice when they read. And I think the video doesn't really work well. So I'm just going to show you a picture here of how we can incorporate songs into lessons. So this is from the YouTube actually, and I will send Lighting the link after the session. So in terms of teaching two vowels, I think it's quite difficult for us to explain how it works. And the best way to demonstrate it is, if we cannot sing well, we might as well find a nice song from YouTube, for example, and then incorporate the songs in the session or the lessons for the children. So when two vowels walk together, the first one does the talking. So you got eat and meet and beat. So then the child would learn that, oh, by the way, when I see these two words together, That means the first one will do the talking. So the song itself is enough to illustrate how it works, because to do it theoretically will be very boring for the child. Okay, so other methods that we could use would be clapping out the syllables, toothbrush, mountain, so doing that. Incorporate songs in lessons, as I have mentioned. If you can sing really well, you can pick out your own guitar and, sing a song. Incorporate arts and crafts. I've showed you regarding my experience in Florida when we got the child to use glue and cut out the paper using scissors. So make it very hands-on. Be consistent with routines and rules. That means if we get them to read something, they have to finish it. Or if they need a break, we provide the movement break, for example. Break down tasks into small steps so we don't force them in one sitting to finish all the letter sounds, for example, that we want them to do. And repetition is very important. Repeat new learnings frequently. How many times, you may ask me, I would say depends on the child. Depends on the child. How many times you need to repeat it. Allow some choice, as I mentioned, for example, books, give them choice so that they can choose books they love. Have children count objects. So maybe you can buy little teddy bears and they can count how many sounds are there in this word. They can pick out the teddy bears. So you may end up going to the store, buying different manipulatives for the children to use. And then reading aloud to the children is very helpful to foster their love for reading and to engage them. You can ask them stories at the end of the story, or at the end of one page, you may ask them, but most children like you to read the entire story first. Linking emotional intelligence to the multisensory brain, given my exposure in EQ as well, I think being very positive is very important. Give them feedback, affirm, provide affirmation, encouragement, tell them that they have made that little bit of improvement that day. And they will really pick up your vibes, because if you are a very positive person, and even though their improvement is just a little bit, they will know today they did really well based on their standard, maybe not based on your standard. And this is another reward system that we used in Florida, where we bought stickers, lots of stickers, and then we got them ready when we did the intervention with the child. And then for that day, for that activity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the child got to choose any sticker of his choice, and then he would stick it. He could exchange it for something bigger or something that he likes. So you could prepare several books that he can choose from, or a pencil case or pencil. It may not be anything expensive. So I think this has something to do with emotions. Emotions. Even adults love being given small rewards, small tokens. We call this token economies. And the reason why we have ticks here are because I think we forgot to bring the stickers. The adults forgot to bring the stickers that day. So generally, then we have to be creative and say, okay, draw a smiley face. Here is a card that we could use when we do any teaching or intervention. So these are sound cards, so the child can sound out the card for M and O and T, so call it M, ot, mot, and you can exchange the cards with other consonants to get them to practice. And here I appreciate the use of using fingers to point to the words. I think we can get the children to focus. Some of the children, their mind would wander after a while. So I think getting the child to point while they're reading really helps them to figure out what they're reading. So this would enhance fluency and confidence and attention. Because some children have inattention issues. They cannot pay attention for too long. So this one is another one where they point to the words and they read the words so that they don't miss the words. I think some of these are common sense ideas, but we also use it from a scientific evidence point of view, it's very useful to point to the words. Okay, so I've taken up about 45 minutes of people's time. So this is the last slide. So my parting words is that we need to provide high quality multisensory instruction and intervention as early as possible to children with reading difficulties, reading disabilities, or those who are at risk. As I mentioned, the ones from high poverty areas, they have a lot of experiential disadvantages, no books in the house. Parents may not actually sit down and read with them. They may hold two jobs. Okay, so this works for children of various backgrounds. Thank you very much for your participation and attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Julia, for the sharing. If you have any questions at all, this is now the time. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, then please type it in the chat box. I'll read it out for you. And Dr. Julia, there was two questions just now. Will you be sharing the presentation slides with us?
Yes, I'll be emailing it to you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I'll email to those of you who have signed up. Okay, there's a question here. Is there any efficient tips for online lesson with students with reading difficulties during this pandemic? What approach is best for online lessons?
May I know whether this is a teacher or a parent, and whether this is to teach a large group or a small group or just one-on-one? Before I answer that question, because I think it requires a specific answer.
One-on-one lesson.
It's one-on-one and it's online. What is the difficulty that the child has? So you see, when we try to figure out what's wrong, we have to ask more questions. What is the difficulty that the child has? Is it reading? Is it verbalizing the words? Is it putting together his thoughts on paper? How old is the child? It's not so simple to answer a question, because when I answer generally, it may misinform the audience. I don't want to misinform people.
Another person, okay, wait. The original person who asked the question said reading difficulties plus not recognizing letters.
Not recognizing letters. How old is the child?
Still waiting. Or would it be easier if you come up, unmute yourself so that it's easier for Dr. Julia to troubleshoot together with you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
It's not Farahin talking, right?
Yes. So I'm a teacher in this center with children with learning disabilities. So one of my students, actually there's two of my students, they can't really comprehend or construct words, read, and also it's hard for them to recognize letters. One of them can only recognize letters from A until E. So this student, one of them is autistic student. The other is normal, but with reading difficulty.
So the one that can read until E has autism, right? He has
Yes.
autism.
Yes.
He is like a high functioning autism.
Yes. High functioning.
But, so yeah, because you're teaching online now, I think many of our children, okay, the problem with online learning is that we strip away the manipulatives, the ability to hold the manipulatives. So I think, of course, the disadvantage is already there. So if you are teaching them online, I suppose you may use some characters in the letters of the alphabet to help him move from E until maybe every five new letters until they reach mastery. Let's say 90% mastery, and then they move on to another 5 letters. So you don't teach them all at once until Z, A to Z for the one whom you describe has autism. I think letters with animal characters, well, you can look into maybe um, Letterland or some other phonics materials that you may have. Some of the letters have got animal characters, and usually children with some problems, they really need help in terms of recognizing the letters and the sounds of the letters. So I would say um, be less ambitious for the child, work at his instructional level, maybe the next 5 new letters. And the other child whom you mentioned cannot string words together for writing, and he doesn't know his letters yet, right? I would say start from the most basic. Because he doesn't know his letters, he needs to know the letters. It's almost like when a child wants to learn how to run, he has to learn how to walk. So we need to help them learn the letter names and the letter sounds, and then we can go sequentially, cumulatively, from all the, for example, cat, bat, mat words, and then we make progress from there. We look at the kinds of progress that the child makes, and then we move sequentially alongside the child. So I think being able to teach at the instructional level of the child is very important. And then I did not mention it here because there's only 1 hour. For children with difficulty, disability, all these labels, I don't really like them. But we need to think of this. We need to think, what are they good at? What is their multiple intelligence? So you say that you're working with a child with autism. What is he good at? Get him to, let's say if he likes drawing, he loves art, he loves to color, you can get him to draw the letters of the alphabet instead of forcing him to learn the way we think, because we also use our 5 senses, but we ourselves, the instructors and the teachers, we are dominant in our own ways. I'm more auditory, but I cannot expect the child to also learn in an auditory manner. Maybe he needs to use tactiles, right? There should be bodily kinesthetic movement when they learn. They need to see. So we need to make sure that we accommodate to the needs, to the way the child processes the information. So understanding the child is rather important. We need to really observe, really use our observation skills and figure out what does the child like. If he likes to draw, then get him to draw the letters of the alphabet, the first child that you were talking about. Get him to color. It looks as if it's waste of time for teachers, but get him to color. This is how they learn. Get him to color it, and then get him to sound it out. And then gradually, week after week, when they bring it back and then show you, you can move beyond the letter E, and then F, G, H, I, J, K. Slowly, bit by bit, you have to plan, not too much.
May I also share a little bit about online instruction? A lot of teachers and therapists, they actually use PowerPoint slides to help children to learn some tasks, or in your case, reading. And if you're using the Elconin boxes, I think that will be a good PowerPoint will be helpful because you could use animation or highlighting the boxes, those kind of things. So there is a lot of preparation involved, but yeah, for the child, it makes it slightly more interactive. And I've also seen examples of a teacher remediation teacher using online games to help children with reading. Some of those online reading games can be easily found, searched online. So you might just want to try and experiment with these kind of resources. Yep.
Yes, there is a really great website online as well. Curiouslearning.com has got a lot of free apps that you could use when you teach the children. In fact, there are lots of free apps, but Curious Learning is an organization that is trying to bridge the gap between countries and trying to give out apps for free. But then again, screen time is a totally different issue. How much screen time the children should get is a totally different issue, which is another long debate, because too much screen time will affect the learning process of the children as well.
Agree. There's another question about reading, but this is about reading Chinese characters, I think. So the question is, do you have any studies on learning Chinese?
I don't have any studies on reading Chinese. There was one lecturer, I think at Universiti Malaysia, who actually studied children who have difficulty reading Chinese. If you're looking into apps, there's one pinyin app. It's called Graphogame Pinyin, that was originally developed by a professor in Finland, which has now been translated into various languages all over the world. So you can try that out. But Pinyin, I think Pinyin, my own take on learning Mandarin and Chinese character, like Korean and let's say Japanese, is that the children must have the chance to actually hold the pencil or the instrument, and then they need to write it, because there are too many tiny little details in the character. It's not like the alphabetic languages. I'm not familiar with that, but I know somebody at Universiti Malaysia was actually looking into it. I'm not sure whether she has retired. You can find out. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Julia. There was another question earlier about online session for small groups, and the person is a remedial class teacher.
What is the question? I don't know. Can I read it here online? Wait, I forgot to.
No worries.
Okay, if you look at the chat screen, hang on.
What about teaching online session for a small group?
What about
teaching online session for a small group?
Small group. So what's the question? You want, how big is the group? How to teach the group? What is the small group? I would say that to make your life easier, I don't know what's the specific question here. Maybe grouping the children according to their ability in that small group may help. The children with the same problems for that small group online session may help you as a teacher to plan your materials better. Because if you have somebody who is faster and somebody, because all of them are all in their online, we are all virtual, right? So then if you try to make sure that you are teaching to a group, it'll be more challenging if you have different ability children. But if you try to make it more homogeneous, then it'll be easier for you to teach. And I think, like Lightin had mentioned, one very cheap way for teachers to teach is to use PowerPoint. Almost everybody who has Microsoft has Microsoft PowerPoint. But then, of course, there's a lot more work for the teacher to do, because imagine before MCO, everybody was using some form of a textbook. There was a workbook, for example, or worksheets, but now everything has to be in that PowerPoint format, and it cannot be too dull. There must be some animation involved. You may have to color the letters. So I think the preparation time is something nobody knows. How much time you put in, nobody knows. Only you know that you have put in more time than usual in terms of preparation when you try to do this online. Yes, because it has to be attractive enough, engaging enough for the children. So I think whether it is an individual or a group, I think to work smart, maybe you can group all the similar homogeneous children together so that it's less taxing, because maybe the other kids already know how to decode, but these ones, all these 4 to 5 children, they don't know how to map the letter sounds yet.
Okay, there's another question about answering questions that was written in a sign-up form. I'll pull up the questions from a sign-up form in a few minutes, and we'll address some of those. Or if you have any specific question right now, please go ahead. No question. Dr. Julia, as you were speaking just now, I just had a thought about systematic teaching of sounds and letters. Is it better to go by A, B, C, D, E, or is there another sort of system or structure depending on how the sounds are made?
I think the high frequency letters should be the main target when we teach. So I would not go for the letter Z or Y or X first. I would go for high frequency words. Most words have got the letter A. Most words have got the letter O and I. So we have to, in our planning, in our instructional planning, then we have to figure out what are the high frequency, what is frequently used in children's books. What is frequently used? So we generally have to be more observant and then not teach the whole letter sound. But I would say knowing the letter names, I think is quite common, because even Disney World actually has a very famous song, a Mickey Mouse running going in the train, and then he's singing the song from A to Z. But when you try to help a child with a reading difficulty, I don't think it is a wise approach to overload that child with all the letters in the alphabet. Because I think reading problems may be correlated to other problems like working memory problems. And this may hamper the progress the teacher is trying to make with that child if she tries to do too much. It's just like trying to go for a buffet meal. If you try to eat too much, you won't enjoy your meal. You have an indigestion. So knowing which ones to teach first is very important. Although it is quite common that we all of us know the song of the alphabet, right? But when you work with children with reading difficulties, there is a need to work on the common high frequency letters and sounds first.
And there's a few questions about students who are bilingual. So especially when their first language is not English, how can you help children who
Read, you mean? To read.
Yes.
This Malay, actually I've just published a paper on, now I'm becoming a bit theoretical and researchy. There is a paper that I've just published this year in the Frontiers in Psychology about multilingual children and the way they learn the language. So I had developed a test on it, and I find that with my experience, my field experience going to the rural locations, that definitely English is more difficult to learn than the languages with transparent orthography. So English is more difficult to learn than the Malay language. Given that the nature of the language is non-transparent, the nature of the orthography is non-transparent, I would then make sure that I teach English first and then Bahasa, because then there will be a transfer effect. What's happening here is that there's a lot of emphasis on Bahasa and then less emphasis on English. So therefore, children whose mother tongue is in some Bumiputra language, for example, in Sarawak, we have people who speak Melanau, not just Malay and Sarawak Malay and all that. So they will be disadvantaged because their home language is already in that mainstream language used in the school. And therefore, they will not be able to pick up on English. And the way we did it at the literacy camp was sort of antithesis to what most people think. Teach the easy ones first and then the more difficult ones first. But we taught them English first, and then it was easier to catch up on Bahasa. Because Bahasa Malaysia or Malay language is actually easier to learn than English. The letter A, all the vowels in Malay is the same except E, ma, ela, you know, the only two variations is that. But if you talk about the letter sound in A, let's say, you have Abang, Ali, Masak, the letter A is the same, it's very consistent. We call it very transparent. So English is more difficult. The letter A can be long A, make. It could be bat, short A. It could be about, it could be a schwa. So English is more difficult to learn than Malay. It's documented already in the scientific journals out there. So when we do the camps for the little kids in the rural areas, we would teach the English first and then the Malay. Because Malay is sort of widely used verbally already in their homes. It's their mother tongue. It can be any variety. It could be Iban, it could be Bidayu, it could be Melanau, it could be Kayan, whatever, all those dialects that they use, because it's very transparent. It's going to be easy for them to catch up.
Following from that, there's a question which is a little bit more specific. So this student is 11 years old. She speaks Mandarin at home and attends a Chinese school. So when she was younger...
Attends a what, sorry? Attends a Chinese school.
Yes, attends a Chinese school.
Chinese school.
Her English was not bad, but the past few years, it has gotten a little bit poorer. She would sometimes forget, her alphabets, and she can't retain simple English words, probably the high frequency words that they give to her. Then sometimes when teaching her to read, she can't even remember a word that was taught to her about 5 seconds ago. Any insights you like to, yeah?
Does she have any problem reading Mandarin? So I'll backtrack a little bit to understand the whole scenario. Does she have any problem reading Mandarin?
I wrote that question. I'm not sure whether she has a lot of problems reading Mandarin because we do not teach Mandarin at our center.
Does she speak Mandarin?
Yeah, she speaks Mandarin.
So you don't know whether she can read Mandarin or write Mandarin words?
I think she can read a little and write a little, but I'm not sure how fluent is she in Mandarin.
The reason why I'm asking is because it seems that the way to diagnose the problem is to understand what she can and cannot do in Mandarin. Then you will understand, go nearer to the problem, then you'll be able to understand why she is not holding in her memory all these things that you're trying to teach her. Because if she is only verbal in Mandarin and she also cannot read in Mandarin or write in Mandarin, it could actually point to a severe problem in terms of a reading difficulty, the severe end. I would put disability. She has to be properly sent for diagnosis. Because if you have a lot of information about her in terms of Mandarin, then you have to find out, because expressive skills are such that it portrays maybe sometimes false information what a child knows, because With verbalizing, you don't really need to learn how to read. You know, she can mimic her parents and her surroundings. But when it comes to writing, she has to be the one to pick up the pinyin and the sounds and all that, the matching sounds and the characters. So if she can also write and she can also read and she can speak in Mandarin, but she has a problem in English, I think that is a very unusual problem. Because
when she was younger, when she came to our center, because she was diagnosed with early development impairment. So when she was younger and she was at our center, she could actually catch English quite well. She knows her A to Z. She could recognize simple words, but it's just these past few years where we tried to even let her read simple sentences in her workbook, or give her like simple spelling, 3-letter words spelling. She could not really remember any of it or recall it, even though we just taught her.
Do you have any conference calls with the parents? Maybe they need to send her for a diagnosis so that early intervention, well, she's already 11. When I say early intervention, I'm talking about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. Maybe diagnosis has to be, I recommend a conference call with the parents if they're open-minded enough, and for the child to be sent for a diagnosis to figure out what is the problem. Because if you say that she can speak Mandarin, but she cannot retain the information that by seeing, so what is happening with a Mandarin is the first question I'm asking. So you say, if you say a little, what is a little, you know? So maybe it's just so basic that she, at the age of 11, parents are worried about transition into teenage years. You know, she'll 11 and then 12 and then 13, she'll be a teenager. So there's a need to find out what is have a diagnosis done by a professional pediatrician, so that when we know the actual problem, then we'll be able to help them. So I always believe that teachers and parents must have conference calls, especially now it's the end of the year. There's a need to actually provide some summary of what happened to the child. And I think open-minded parents are the ones who can really help their children really fast. I've met some really open-minded parents who are willing to help. Of course, if parents are in denial, then it'll be a bit more challenging. Yeah, so having a conference call with the parent would really, really help the child. The child, we are talking about the child. The child is the one we are interested in, right?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And there's another question that came up that was asked by a few people. Because in Malaysia, we need to learn different languages. What, in view of that, what language will be best for the child to learn?
You need to choose which language to learn. We are all multilinguals. But if the child has a severe, I'm just answering not for typical children, not for typically developing children. If a child has a reading difficulty, a severe reading disability, and if the child needs just one language, just one, I would say that depending on the support from the school, I would go for English. And then once they pick up the phonics in English, they can go for Bahasa. Then the parents, if they speak Mandarin at home, that gives the child a leverage in terms of understanding another spoken language. But I wouldn't recommend forcing the child with that difficulty or disability to learn Mandarin if there is a working memory issue. So there's a lot of if then else here, like a robot if then else, if then else. So I don't say that blanket, if you have to choose, well, suddenly everybody choose just English. No, I think some children are intelligent enough to pick up all the languages. Some families are very multilingual. The father speaks English, mother speaks Malay, grandmother speaks Mandarin. multilinguals. Our entire nation is multilingual, but if the child has a reading difficulty or a reading disability, and the parents are at crossroads, they have to decide what language to choose. I would go for English, which is more difficult to learn, and then later on they will be transferred to Malay. Whether we love Bahasa Malaysia or not, that is all about motivation and about passion, and that we can develop through storytelling, using puppets and different types of mechanism.
There's also another question which is related as well. The student can speak quite well, but when it comes to writing, there is a problem to put words into writing. And then they also can't recognize the syllable sounds. And grade 5 student is probably 11 years old. Grade 5 students can only, probably this is another question or another aspect. The grade 5 student can only recognize 2 syllable words. And these students, they even have, it's not just the Malay language, they also have problems with Mandarin and English.
Sounds like a genuine reading difficulty cutting across languages, because real reading difficulties cuts across language. It has been proven in Mandarin, people can have reading problems, reading difficulties and disabilities. So, so if the child is in grade 5 already, so they would need to be very, so grade 5 sounds like this child goes to an international school. So intensive, highly intensive reading intervention. I would say 1-to-1. The dosage is 1-to-1. During our doctoral training, we do it in groups, and then I noticed that in groups sometimes it doesn't really work. So 1-to-1 really helps, because this child is already 11. He will be a teenager soon. Teenager, adolescents, different set of problems. So that means the intervention should be rather intensive. That means when I say intensive, the dosage should be every day. It's almost like when the doctor says we must exercise. Don't ask the question, is it before my medical checkup? It's like every day we exercise, and then how many minutes a day? So based on scientific evidence, some scientists have used 25 minutes, 45 minutes. So it depends on the time that you negotiate with the parents. If you are talking about a 1-to-1 session, maybe 45 minutes would help, because it sounds like the child can only do up to 2 syllables, but most of the grade 5 materials are beyond 2 syllables. Beyond 2 syllables already. If you're talking about international school, if you mention grade 5, that means it's an international school. So the text is getting longer, and the child should be moving beyond learning to read, and they should be reading to learn. So therefore, then intensive intervention should be conducted, I would say daily basis, Monday to Friday, a few minutes, 45 minutes a day, covering the basics, because there must be a reason why. There could be an auditory processing problem. So this has to be diagnosed. I mean, on the internet here, bring the child for diagnosis by a pediatrician or speech language expert, and then figure out why can't this child count syllables beyond 2. Does the child also have a memory problem? Is there a spillover effect to mathematics? Is he having problem in mathematics, math problems? I suspect there is, because grade 5 international school mathematics has got a lot of words in it, all the word problems. But then let's say if it's purely symbols, like the ones when we talk about Kumon, can he also do that? Like carry 1, and then. So I think there's a need to really understand the child. Multidisciplinary team has to be set up for the child. The English teacher, the mathematics teacher, the parents, you need to convince a group, convene a group, and then figure out what's the problem. Are the teachers in other subjects also seeing something similar? Because if we really want to help the child, then we will put the child in the center and really figure out what is the issue at hand. Is it a reading? I think it sounds like a reading problem, but this child needs, whichever state this child is from, city or town, he has to be sent for diagnosis. And then intervention has to be provided intensively, because my concern is that he's already 11. Then when he reached 12 and 13 and 14, teenagers have different sets of problems. And then they might lose interest in school because of all this. So there's a high correlation between motivation and reading, passion for reading. There's a high correlation. So don't ask why they're not interested in reading. Give them the tools to read, give them the skills to read, equip them. So providing the intensive intervention, I think, is very important.
Okay, for this is the last question already, because it's 3 minutes to 11:30. For older children with reading difficulties, do we still start intervention with learning phonics first? What if they still have difficulties associated with phonemes and associating the phonemes to the graphemes?
Okay, so the key point is start where the child is. We start where the child is. So that if the child, okay, if a 33-year-old were to go for intervention and he doesn't know his phonemes, there's no way we can tell them to read the words. So we still start where he is. Whether it's an adult or a child, we will start where the child is. We will start where he is. So because we cannot make them jump too high a gap. So we have to start at the instructional level. It doesn't matter what age. It matters where the learning level is, the instructional level. So I'm giving some exaggeration here. So if it's a 33-year-old who cannot read, or a 6-year-old who cannot read, or a 9-year-old who cannot read, and they don't know their phonemes, we start at the phoneme. Whether he's 50, 30, 7, 6, we start at that level, because that's where they're at, so that they can catch up, so that they don't feel like they are jumping too big a gap. And then once again, we would have left our passengers behind. So using the analogy of a pilot of a plane, we're supposed to travel with our passengers all arriving at the same destination. So if he is not quite there in terms of letter names, sounds, phonemes, then we'll start at that level.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that nicely ends the session, because it's 11:30 now. Thank you so much for joining us this Saturday morning. And thank you very much, Dr. Julia, for sharing with us your insights, your experiences, and some examples of what we can use to trial and error with children that we are teaching. Any final last words from Dr. Julia?
Well, I hope it has been a useful session. Thank you very much for joining. And thank you, Light Team, and thank you, NECIC, and also One Fateha, who helped to organize this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay.